as a sort of foundational pillar that allowed the Xbox and the console-based first-person shooter to thrive. The games in the core Halo trilogy excelled at many different kinds of game types. From big team games with giant explosions to fun and wacky stuff like zombies and griffball and NASCAR and chess eventually. But the core multiplayer Halo experience has always been about 4 versus 4 arena-based deathmatch and objective game types.
Campaign prepares an amazing table, but multiplayer's your meal. I could eat it every goddamn day, forever.
The original Halo trilogy had a formula that was very basic and very predictable without being repetitive. The newer Halo games have abandoned this foundational formula in an attempt to reach a wider audience. And in this attempt to reach a wider audience, Microsoft has simultaneously given new players no reason to play these newer games, while driving off players who have been with the franchise for over 11 years, myself included. Matches in multiplayer Halo games revolved around one core concept. All players start out on equal footing. In the original Halo trilogy, every player in a match would start out with the same resources. The same weapons, same positions, same equipment, with the same opportunities more or less. And any real variance in this was due to some inherent design objective, such as making one-side objective matches where you have to steal the enemy flag or plant the enemy bomb in the enemy base. Starting out on even ground meant that a skilled team would have to be able to maintain areas of interest in the game in order to come out on top. Such locations included weapon spawns, player spawns, routes where an objective could safely be run, and easily defensible areas where you can maintain an advantage over the other team. The ability to control these areas is, simply enough, called map control. Having map control meant that you were able to influence the outcome of a battle that any well-designed game of Halo should have. Let's take a quick look at an example on the map The Pit from Halo 3. Alright, if you look here, players spawn on the southern side of the map near this hallway. This southern hallway is where rockets spawn on the map. Active camouflage, which makes players invisible, spawns in this middle hallway up here. Sniper rifles spawn at the towers on the northern side of the map. An energy sword and overshield, which is a health boost power-up, spawn in this central northern room. Players naturally flock to the rocket hallway, so that they can grab rockets and give their team an instant advantage. Using the rockets, players could then move through the map with little resistance and take the remaining power-ups and power weapons. And they could move in and defend either the sword room or the area around the rocket hallway. The sword room is easy to defend because it only has one opening. But by controlling the rocket hall, you ensure that your team will be able to grab the rocket launcher when it respawns. Knowing that these weapons are on a timer gives players an incentive to move around the map and control different areas when camping seems to be a legitimate strategy. Given all of this information, you can also know reasonably what to expect of an opponent. You know that you start with the same weapons that they do in roughly the same positions. And you also know that there's a rocket launcher, there's overshields, there's a sword, there's sniper rifles, and there's active camouflage. You only have to take these variables into consideration because you have no reason to expect anything else. Given this, you know approximately where other players are going to be and what weapons they should have. You won't know exactly what the other team is doing, but you can have a general idea based on what you have and what your team is telling you at any point in time. You can use all of this information to plan any necessary counterattacks or any kind of defenses that you might need. If you're playing a capture the flag game and you know that your team didn't get rockets, that means that you should prepare at any point in time for someone with a rocket launcher to come strolling in and ruin your day and take your flag. So you should get somewhere where he won't be able to see you immediately. If you know that you don't have a sniper rifle, but there is a sniper rifle on the map, you have reason to expect that you would get shot in the face when you run across an open hallway. This kind of planning makes Halo what it is. You can reasonably expect things from your opponent, and you can try and set up counterattacks or defenses in any way that you can. This rush for the weapons and this constant cycle of making sure that you have weapons is what makes Halo Halo. It gives flow to the battle where you can reasonably expect where there should be a conflict at any point in time. Halo Reach introduced two huge game-changing aspects: armor abilities, and reticle bloom. The role of bloom is supposed to be to punish players who miss their shots and spam the trigger. And the more you miss and spam, the less accurate your gun becomes. These are supposed to provide players with a reliable weapon that demands and rewards accuracy. And initially, it would seem that bloom successfully does this.
You kind of get control over how accurate your shot is going to be. If you're spamming that trigger as fast as you can fire it, it's going to go kind of wild. If you're trying to hit a guy really, really far away, then you have to slow that down.
Everyone's totally destroying with the DMR. It's like everyone's got a Death Star in their hands.
There is one major problem with bloom, though, and that's that shooting while bloom does not ensure that you will actually miss the shots that you're firing. And in most cases, shooting with a little bit of bloom is actually preferable the majority of the time because your rate of fire will make up for the fact that you're not landing every single shot. Suddenly, our weapon that's supposed to be extremely surgically precise and extremely reliable is not precise or reliable when used most effectively. And the outcome of two players aiming and shooting at exactly the same spot becomes chance. It becomes something that the random number generator decides instead of skill. Armor abilities are pieces of equipment given to players as soon as they spawn. In-game, they have loadouts where they can pick from different sets of armor abilities, and some of them include Sprint, which is exactly what it sounds like. It just lets you run rapidly around the map for a limited amount of time. Armor Lock, which lets you be invincible but stationary for some amount of time. Active Camouflage, which makes you invisible for some amount of time. Jetpack, which is exactly what it sounds like. Hologram, which creates a holographic image of yourself running in one direction. Evade, which lets you roll out of the way of oncoming objects. But really, to understand how this works, I ought to give some time to Chris Carney and some of the other people at Bungie.
Super excited to see what people do with armor abilities. It totally changes the game.
You've got this secret weapon in your back pocket that's your fourth leg of fun.
What do you want to be? Invisible? Do you want to fly? Do you want to turn to stone?
With Reach, you've got guys in jetpacks flying around, invisibility guys just showing up.
It's kind of a give and take between us and Sage and Josh, trying to figure out what's that perfect balance with all the new stuff.
There's a lot of that goes on. They're like, shh, don't tell Sage, he'll nerf it.
You're juggling plates, right? You're just sitting there spinning the plates, and occasionally once you're spinning, you're like, ah! And you're like, making Viz more powerful. And everyone's like, no, I'm picking Viz. And you're like, okay, make it less powerful. And then, oh, no, everyone that's what Sage and those guys are doing. It's a fucking huge challenge.
It breeds this smarter combat. You'll definitely notice a big difference in how the game functions.
Right now, at this exact moment in development, Armor Lock's insane. It's super powerful. I love it.
It is just fucking fun.
There are two Slayer maps there.
Most abilities just serve to disrupt gameplay, with Jetpack completely breaking map flow because most of the maps weren't built with Jetpack in mind, and Active Camouflage, which had no proper countermeasures against it. The real issue with all these armor abilities is that there was no way to properly anticipate them until they had already been used. You had no idea that someone had Sprint until you saw them sprinting, and no idea that someone had Active Camouflage until you caught them trying to cloak. In all of these cases, it is way too late and you couldn't anticipate properly what your opponent could be doing at any given point in time. You had no idea how many of them had Jetpack, if any of them had Jetpack, if anyone had Armor Lock, if anyone was invisible. Maybe all of them were invisible. You would have no idea at any point in time because any of them could be possible. And this inability to properly predict how a game would play comes into play in Halo 4. Halo 4 lets players create their own loadouts that they can bring from game to game, dictating the weapon they spawn with and the armor ability they get to use, such as the new Promethean Vision, which lets you see through walls, or returning favorites, such as the newly buffed Active Camouflage. You also get to pick from all of your favorite precision weapons, such as the Designated Marksman Rifle, which is so overly strong that it makes every map seem claustrophobic and every other weapon useless in comparison. You also get the Plasma Pistol, which disables vehicles instantly, and the Bolt Shot, which is essentially a shotgun that kills in one hit. Halo 4 also went ahead and stole perks from Call of Duty, such as the one that totally isn't Dexterity and the one that totally isn't Ninja Pro. Most of these perks attempt to bandage wounds that Halo 4 inflicts upon itself, such as one that buffs vehicle health, which wouldn't be needed if you didn't have the Plasma Pistol and loadouts, and Stealth, which wouldn't be needed if Promethean Vision wasn't so overpowered, and Stability, which wouldn't be needed if my player didn't have a seizure every time he was getting shot at. The standard weapon spawning system was removed in favor of global and personal ordnance. Global Ordnance is a weapon drop that occurs every 2 minutes in a random location and has a random weapon. And Personal Ordnance lets you call in your own weapons if you get enough points. But it totally isn't kill streaks, guys! With these randomized spawns and impossibly difficult to comprehend loadout possibilities, map control and starting on equal footing are nearly impossible. 343 claims that this was done in order to allow new players to access the game more easily and to let bad players use more powerful weapons, but it fails on both of these. Halo 4 is the worst player retention of any Halo game to date, as evidenced by these graphs. One of these graphs is from Bungie's internal number crunching of Halo 2's player retention from month to month, and the other one is a graph taken from 343 servers about the peak player numbers for Halo 4 from day to day. As you can see, Halo 4 has lost over 90% of its population from peak player count over the last 6 months, while Halo 2 retained 80% of its population from month to month on average. 50% of all Halo 4 players left the day Black Ops 2 came out, and they never came back. As far as letting bad players use stronger weapons, Personal Ordnance can only be obtained if you get to a certain point threshold. Better players are going to get to this threshold first, and then get stronger weapons before other players, and just completely stomp all of the bad players. You can have some players getting no drops per game, while good players can get 3 or more. Players don't want to play a Call of Duty clone. They have Call of Duty for that. In Halo 4's attempt to emulate Battlefield 3 in Call of Duty, you've just given players reason to go play those games. Getting Halo back to what it does best, that formulaic 4 versus 4 arena gameplay, would go a long way towards offering something different and getting players back.